welcome to RCA Radio, a podcast where we cover the latest news and challenges in regulatory, compliance, and quality assurance facing the life science industries. I'm your host, Brandon Miller. In this episode of RCA Radio, we'll be looking into the pharmaceutical industry and the important things we can expect to happen in 2025. Today, I'm joined by Anita Michael, Executive Pharma Compliance Expert and Principal Consultant at RCA, as well as Rona LeBlanc-Rivera, Director of Regulatory Affairs, also from RCA. Welcome, Anita and Rona. Thank you both for joining me today. With the new year upon us, I want to help our friends in the pharmaceutical industry understand what they can expect from the industry rolling over from 2024 and what's to come in 2025, so they can prepare themselves for success with the incoming changes. So to start us off, what important things from 2024 are rolling over into 2025 in the pharmaceutical industry?
Thanks, Brandon. I will start off by talking about regulatory timeframes, which will be a big concern to a lot of companies. So going from 2024 to 2025, I really do not see or anticipate a huge change, say, in submission review goal dates. Those timelines are pretty much set under PDUFA and GDUFA, at least until 2027. So the review goals for standard submission, priority submission, major and minor amendments, and supplements, I really don't anticipate much changes there. However, with the impending workforce changes that could play a role in potentially delaying some goal dates, I can see that coming. But again, it's a wait and see. But to start, I don't see a huge change in the review clocks.
So yes, I agree with that, Rona. For the inspection area, I believe they'll remain the same as well. For our pre-approval inspections, our biologic license application inspections, and also for GMP inspections. And depending on the workforce, whether they will be doing cutbacks or becoming more innovative with data processing, we should still receive our reports within 90 days if the inspections are classified NAI or VAI. NAI being no action indicated, VAI being voluntary action indicated. However, if you have an OAI status, official action indicated, then it will be in the FDA system alerted within 2 days, but it may take much longer for a compliance review to go through. So I'm finished with that portion. Did we, Rona, want to go on to the labeling increase?
So another change or carryover from 2024 could be in the realm of drug labeling and transparency in drug product labeling. So back in April of 2024, there was a draft guidance that was issued, content and format of composition statement and corresponding statement of ingredients and labeling in NDAs and ANDAs. In that guidance, FDA provided some recommendations for transparency regarding the statement of ingredients and applications, hoping to minimize the number of review cycles to ensure labeling contains the required qualitative and quantitative information. Now, under the regulations, 21 CFR, there's a requirement that NDAs or new drug applications contain a list of all components used in drug product manufacture. And the flip side for ANDAs, abbreviated new drug applications or generic drugs, they generally must contain information demonstrating sameness and bioequivalence to that NDA, new drug application, or branded drug or RLD, reference listed drug. So the ANDAs, they typically look at the NDA labeling for the ingredients to then make a copy of that product. Historically, there have been several instances where the NDA label did not contain all of the ingredients, thereby impacting ANDA review cycle. So that would require a lot more back and forth between the FDA for them to finalize their formulation and then proceed through the ANDA application process. How will FDA enforce this requirement for NDA applicants? That remains to be seen, but that was the latest guidance in April, and I can see that coming forward into 2025. Another major rule, not a guidance yet, but a final rule issued in December of 2024 in the Federal Register, has to do with non-prescription or over-the-counter drug products. So this rule establishes some additional requirements for some, not all, but some OTC regulated products under additional condition of non-prescription use. And the final rule is intended to increase options for consumer access to safe and effective drug products. So going forward, the labeling will indicate whether or not there's an additional condition of use to be met prior to the consumer then using that product. So, for example, they may have to go to the company's website to answer a questionnaire, or there may be some other information that can't fit on that carton or in that box and that label, so they would have to go elsewhere to perform some additional steps. So I think that's a carryover from 2024, and we'll see more of that in 2025.
I do see for some years there's been a push by the agency for industry to have prepared for inspections, their annual product reviews, and also periodic product reviews, which can be considered APRs, annual product reviews. So there's been a push for key quality metrics data to be aligned with patient safety. So that will be a carryover to 2025. I don't see any changes in the requirement for invalidating OS data being readily available for inspection, whether a company's had failures, if they've had strong, robust validation data, any processing control issues, or data analysis that would show that the process is within the parameters. So that type of quality metrics data is going to be key for 2025 as it was in previous years.
It sure sounds like our listeners are going to have to keep their finger on the pulse of these guidances and rules going into 2025. And speaking of 2025, what are the industry focuses for 2025 and what changes could we see?
I'll take a look at that from the pharma side. So with 2025 and the change in administration, we can see or anticipate a reduction in regulations from the FDA. Now, I say that because when we had the same administration some years back, the FDA had to remove 2 regulations for every new one issued. So I certainly see that coming back, and perhaps they would have to remove 3 or 4 regulations for each new one issued. So I definitely see a reduction in regulations under the incoming administration. We also know that there are plans to reduce FDA's workforce. How that will impact the review cycles and timelines, and that remains to be seen. I think it also depends on the level of employee that's removed. If it's more senior leadership focused, I think we see more policy changes. If it's more like boots on the ground reviewer focused, I would anticipate a slowdown in goal dates, in getting meetings, and everything related to the review cycle. I can see that slowing down for sure. Some other important changes that we can see on the horizon for 2025 has to do on the technology side. So one thing that's coming more so into fruition, this has been in the works for over 5 years now, but it's Knowledge-Aided Structured Application, or CASA, as is the abbreviation. So it's a way for the FDA to streamline reviews using pre-populated structured data elements. And the idea is to have computer-aided analyses of applications to assess risk, as opposed to the current practice of reviewing text-based narratives. So the platform would rely on algorithms and a standard format for data input and uniform output of information. This would allow FDA to intake application data and capture critical assessment information in a structured way and hopefully streamline the overall review process. And the CASA submission is intended to be a separate submission in addition to your NDA or the application itself. So perhaps with the new administration's ties to technology, there could be a faster timeline to implement this knowledge-aided structure application, the CASA, and get that rolling. And I think that would be a useful tool for the reviewers. But again, it all remains to be seen. But I think that's something to be on the lookout for. And also, as we've seen recently, some draft guidances have been issued in regards to the use of AI in the regulatory review space. So one that just came out is called Considerations for the Use of Artificial Intelligence to Support Regulatory Decision-Making for Drug and Biological Products. So that guidance shares FDA's current thinking on the use of AI by applicants to produce information or data intended to support regulatory decision-making related to safety, efficacy, and quality of drugs. So some things for applicants to be mindful of or to consider is that the data used to develop that AI model should be what's called fit for use, be relevant, reliable, accurate, and companies should also be mindful of data drift during the life cycle of using these AI models. I'd like to turn it over to Anita to speak on the audit side.
Thank you, Rona. For the inspection audit side, some changes for 2025 could be enterprise transformation. There may be some funding or a movement of funding to increase the modernization activities for critical inspection platforms, to make them more data-driven with advanced technology, and to optimize the processes across the agency. Another area of concern would be the drug shortages and the supply chain challenges we've been faced with. Under the new administration, we may see an advance in capabilities to respond to drug shortages through improved analytics and regulatory approaches. The FDA can increase funding to hire additional investigators for inspections and supply disruptions of medical products and shortages in order to make sure that our supply chain is healthy. I also see in 2025 a continuing and tightening integration of CEDAR reviews with the inspection investigation team for identifying high-risk areas and products to focus on. For example, vaccines, sterile injectables, low-dose drugs, chemotherapy drugs that are now in shortage, and also diabetic medications that are in drug shortage. I also see the FDA in 2025 becoming more risk-based and data-driven for warning letter data, FDA 483 data, and drug shortage data.
Oh, it sounds like there's a lot going on in 2025, and with the potential slowdowns, with the reduction in the workforce, how can companies prepare themselves for these expected changes?
But from a regulatory perspective, I think it would be helpful whether a company is writing their own submissions or having someone else write their submissions, perform a submission gap assessment. It's always helpful to have another set of eyes, look over your documents to really make sure you're putting your best foot forward from the submission standpoint. It's also helpful to take advantage of FDA meetings. There are many avenues to interact with the FDA early on in the process, whether you're in the development stage or if you're right before submission, so pre-IND or pre-ANDA stage or pre-NDA stage. You can also interact with the FDA via controlled correspondence depending on your product. So it's very helpful to take advantage of these meetings to get FDA's thinking and feedback before you do your submissions. And just as a general comment, if this is not your first submission, you can help mitigate deficiencies by using comments from your prior submissions. You can use comments from performing the regulatory gap assessments, and certainly comments obtained from FDA meetings, whether you met face-to-face with the FDA or if they gave you written comments. I've seen many instances where firms tend to make the same mistakes over and over. So I think it's helpful to learn from the past. So those would be my 3 points. Perform a submission gap assessment, take advantage of meetings, and use comments in the past to help plan your move forward.
So for the inspection side, companies can prepare themselves for 2025, driving their inspection readiness. For example, having third-party audits and training performed, having third-party supplier qualification audits, and have third-party perform regulatory and GMP gap assessments. The reason being is that if you face additional regulatory and compliance hurdles, it may take longer to resolve in the future due to the government cutbacks and changes in leadership roles at the agency, and possibly impacting your product. An additional area would be enhancing data and information. So the FDA is increasingly identifying instances of unreliable data. This could come through your pre-market submissions, marketing applications for drugs and biologics, and also during inspections. In order to be prepared, your company should be very familiar with the ECOLA Plus principles data integrity requirements, as well as Part 11 requirements. It's good to have a third-party data integrity company come in and do an audit for you and a gap assessment in this area.
Well, it sure sounds to me that our companies need to prepare themselves for whatever could potentially come up in 2025. Before we sign off, do either of you have any final thoughts or key takeaways?
Brandon, for 2025, companies should be proactive, especially when it comes to inspection readiness, and also familiarize themselves with the FDA guidance documents and the GMP requirements.
Yes, for 2025, I think companies should be mindful of the potential slowdown depending on the FDA workforce changes that are coming our way. I encourage companies to submit for more FDA meetings to discuss their development concerns and mitigate issues before putting an entire application together.
I would say that's some great advice for our listeners. And I would like to thank you both for taking the time to go over what we can expect in 2025 in the pharmaceutical industry and how companies can prepare themselves for these incoming changes. And I also want to thank our listeners for tuning into this episode of RCA Radio. Be sure to subscribe to be the first to know when we upload the next episode of RCA Radio. Thanks again and have a great day.